Hey there, guys. How's it going? Welcome to Breakfast All Day. Christy and Alonso here. Up next for us is Dog. It's about a dog and Channing Tatum.
In that order. Yeah, pretty much. So Channing Tatum plays a veteran who wants to get back into active service, but is dealing with various physical and neurological issues that have happened since his last tour of duty. His staff sergeant dies, and in order to get himself back into active service, Tatum's character agrees to transport his staff sergeant's canine battle dog Lulu, a Belgian Malinois, from where do they start?
Washington.
From Washington State to Arizona. Mm-hmm. And the dog, having suffered through combat and having been injured, is a handful and is easily upset and difficult to manage. And of course, so is Channing Tatum. So the two of them bond over the course of a road trip that involves adventures in Portland and San Francisco. At one point, he pretends to be blind to try and get a free hotel room at a fancy place in San Francisco. The dog attacks a Muslim guy because that's what army dogs apparently do, even though they're working in Muslim countries, which seems like it would be a bad idea. Anyway, it's a road trip and it's a bonding thing, and everybody learns stuff.
You sound so cynical about this. Like, it didn't move you. Did it not move you? I cried.
I didn't cry. I think that there's a lovely kind of like dude and dog who are wounded and who find redemption together story at the heart of this movie. And those parts I do like. There's so much else in this movie that drives me up the fucking wall.
Like what?
Well, look, I think you can absolutely make a movie that honors the service of veterans, that champions their sacrifice without making everybody who's not a veteran seem like a total asshole. Mm-hmm. But this movie goes out of its way to like the whole stop in Portland. You know, there's all these like liberal people who want to talk to him about how like soldiers get sent off to fight wars for oil companies and, you know, different stuff, and none of what they're saying is wrong, but the movie presents it. You would think that like Clint Eastwood and John Wayne had collaborated on this film. It gets so like
I'm not sure
up its own
that.
Conservative ass at moments. I'm like, come on, movie, give me a break.
I view that more really fast. I view that more as like Channing Tatum's character's inability to actually have a conversation with anybody who was not in the military. I view that more as like a reflection of how his time in active duty had messed him up so badly that he had a hard time connecting with people in the civilian world.
That's a generous read, but I'll allow it. You know, I think there's a larger discussion to be had about how movies portray the Gulf Wars and the post 9/11 wars, because, you know, you had like World War II happened and we all agreed that was a good thing, and so movies about it for decades were about like, wasn't this great, didn't we accomplish something, you know, important and terrific? And then Vietnam happened, and at first the movies were all like, well, that kind of sucked and we shouldn't have gone, and you got like the Deer Hunter and Coming Home. But then of course Ronald Reagan comes into office and you've got Chuck Norris being like, no, let's go back there and win it this time, you know. And so I think we're still wrapping our heads around what we even think about the George W. Bush wars of the aughts. And this movie wants to be apolitical about it and wants to sort of offer this idea of like, you know, on the one hand, yes, veterans are coming back, you know, damaged, and they've got PTSD and they've got physical issues going on, and they're not being taken care of sufficiently, which is absolutely true. And at the same time, it's like they want to give you this redemption narrative that makes you feel all warm and fuzzy about the troops and about war and about stuff as though it were like White Christmas or something. And so there's a lot going on in this movie, I think, where it's sort of at odds with itself. But again, if you can cut through all that stuff and just get to the Channing Tatum and the dog stuff, it's terrific. I just wish there was more of that and less of the other white noise going on.
It's a tough balance to strike, right? And Channing Tatum and Reid Carolin co-directed this. This is their first movie they've directed together. Reid Carolin wrote the Magic Mike movies. The two of them collaborated for many, many years. And so I feel like they have a genuine respect for the military and they want to reflect that, but they want to as a like a little nugget, and when I couch it inside of this fluffy, fuzzy, feel good road trip mismatched buddy comedy, you know, and it's just a hard balance for anybody who is a seasoned filmmaker, but they are not. This is like their first crack at actually directing a film together. And I think they did the best they could. And if you look at it just as a zippy, heartwarming road trip movie with Channing Tatum being funny and self-deprecating and the dog being a terror, but also adorable. I think if you look at it in the most superficial way, it is enjoyable. And so I laughed quite a bit.
There are many things when you look at them in the most superficial way, but right. Yes, I hear you.
I sat with Nick and our dog Baxter on that couch right there behind me, and we all watched it together. This is a more vulnerable Channing Tatum than we ordinarily see. I mean, yes, he gives the people what they want. He is shirtless and hunky, and but then he's also uses his physicality for humor, like with the dog in the bathtub and the whole thing in the lobby. It's, he does all that. But I think that there's a scene toward the end where we see the depth of this character's damage, and we see what he has undergone physically and psychologically, and how the dog helps him with that. That is quite moving. And when they actually get where they need to go, it may be laid on a little bit thick, but there's a thing with the dog at the funeral that is very heartwarming and heart-tugging and sad.
It's a little much, but I bought it. It worked in the context. I like the scenes with Ethan Suplee, actually. Yes. I thought those to me felt like the most clear-eyed examination of what this character was going through and what combat had done to him and what he might yet become. And before anybody tries to drag me out, I'm making this movie political, the movie made this movie political.
Absolutely. Totally. And then there's a weird scene where like Channing Tatum's truck gets broken into, and they use the dog's sense of smell and the high-tech training the dog has had to go find the person who broke into it. And it's like where they end up in this homeless encampment underneath the Santa Monica Pier. Like, I don't know that works. It feels very clunky and forced.
It doesn't work. And I think they very could have easily just had it to be where, and I don't want to get into spoilers, but you could have said something about the fact that there are a great many ex-military among our nation's unhoused right now. That is a problem and an epidemic that the government isn't doing enough to help solve. But instead, it just becomes another moment of like, of this movie's sort of weird rah-rah jingoism that I think doesn't play.
I think it's trying to do a lot and maybe not always doing it all that gracefully as far as this balance it's trying to find. But if you're just looking for like, oh, look, it's a cute dog, and Lulu was played by 3 different dogs. And
okay, tell me this is apparent, because they're selling this movie as a very like sweet, it's a dog movie, but it gets kind of dark at moments. I'm like, what would you be your ballpark of like, how young?
Okay, so Nick is 12, and there's a scene where he might get into a tantric threesome with these 2 women that he meets outside of a bar. Like, that's a conversation I'm glad enough to have, because nobody asks me any questions about these things, and that's great. We don't need to have that discussion yet. So, I don't know, 13?
Okay. I only bring it up because the ads, I think there's a real divide between what the ads are selling and what the movie really is.
Right. It looks really cute. And like in the ads, the scene where like the dog takes off in the hotel lobby looks like, haha, it's so wacky. He got exposed not being blind. But then when you realize what the dog is taking off after, which is a Muslim person. That is trickier. Yes.
And I think, again, that's another moment where the movie could have like addressed something that it chooses not to, and in not choosing to do so, it leaves you with a like, what are we endorsing here exactly? What is this movie even saying? So that's I have mixed feelings about it.
As do I. What's your number?
5.5.
Okay, I'm saying 6.5. So our number is 6. At times it is quite lovely, and it's shot very beautifully. Lots of sunsets and lens flares, and Channing Tatum sitting on the hood of his truck with the dog next to him, having
rustic
snacks.
Desert motels.
Yeah. Anyway, show your kids or don't.
Yeah, I mean, have that discussion if you're ready. Thanks for watching, you guys. Subscribe, hit the bell, and find out what we're up to. Check us out on BeFast All Day on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and check out our Patreon at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay, wrapping up our discussions of Peacemaker, speaking of veterans, also talking about Pam and Tommy and the Gilded Age, and our monthly Off the Menu is happening this week. We're talking about Sidney Poitier's second directorial effort, the romance A Warm December, which was selected by our Patreon members. Become one at patreon.com/BeFastAllDay. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Bye.